Okay, good morning, everyone. We've just had a most interesting panel discussion by some of the leaders in Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector and landscape. And as I was exercising early this morning, I thought, what do I speak about with you here? And as I sat and listened to the many great contributions we heard a short while ago, I bring us back to what I was told this conference is about. Caribbean Sustainable Energy Conference, from ideas to action. And I want to introduce the concept of reality here this morning. Because you see, very often in this energy space, we are led down different pathways that I personally don't believe are quite realistic. And I want to focus on the Caribbean region and just pick up on a point that David just made a short while ago. Because this is lost. There is no doubt about this in my mind, as I've traveled the world, that this point is lost throughout, unless you don't have it. Because very often in life, it is only when you don't have something you appreciate it. Energy security. And I can guarantee you that the majority of us in this room don't appreciate the value of energy security. And very often, we let people with all of these concepts and ideas lead discussions. Because they say the squeaky wheel gets the most oil. And I've understood that in the past few weeks to mean whoever is making the most noise, that's where the focus will be on. Energy security and what it means for us in the region is something that has become much more important to me. And that has to be, in my submission, the leading platform and the pillar of what we go forward with. Because you see, as we talk about all these various nice-sounding concepts of reduction of carbon, which we have to do, don't get me wrong, reduction of methane, cleaning up the environment, cleaning up our atmosphere, otherwise what will happen? We have to take charge of our own destiny here in the Caribbean. And I'd like that to sink in. Because what Arlene just mentioned to you all is a reality. The disappearing beach in Mayaro. We in the Caribbean region and the rest of the world, but more so as small developing island economies, are seeing the immediate effects of climate change. The erosion, coastal erosion, the droughts, the unnatural amounts of rainfall, the flooding, and the reality for us, fortunately not so much in Trinidad, but I'm concerned about the rest of the region, is how do we afford all of these nice sounding concepts that in my view are being pushed on us by the rich developing countries. And I'd like to start with this. This is from the World Resources Institute, dated the 2nd of March of this year. And I'll just quote a short part for it, right? It's talking about this interactive chart shows changes in the world's 10 top emitters. The top three greenhouse gas emitters, China, the United States, and India, contribute 42.6% of total emissions, while the bottom 100 countries only account for 2.9%. 3 countries, 49.6. Just before that, I was looking at another article that talked about the 5 countries that produce the most carbon dioxide. China, United States, India, Russia, Japan. So the top 3, over 45%. The whole of CARICOM and Latin America only contribute 3% to emissions. But we are seeing the deleterious effects of this climate change on our lives. Trinidad and Tobago has energy security, and that's something we take for granted because we've been utilizing our natural gas to produce electricity. And I smile. Just look around the room. The amount of lights that we have on continuously throughout the day. The air condition running continuously throughout the day. And I wanted to use that as a platform for the conversation this morning. Because you see, it's okay for everyone to sit in these rooms and to talk about concepts and what needs to be done. And in the travels I've been doing over the last year, talking about energy security, very often that's where we get caught up. You have people talking about measuring the carbon, what needs to be done, etc. Let's bring it a little bit more back to reality again. Hydrogen. A lovely, lovely cliche concept. Everybody in the energy sector around the world is talking about green hydrogen. Go and do some research and see how many green hydrogen producing plants there are operational. One of the speakers a short while ago talked about the United States and the IRA. Just by the introduction of the IRA, that one passage of legislation by President Biden, it has shifted dynamically the whole global landscape in this area. And when it was mentioned a short while ago, it captured it. What that has done now is pull resources from the rest of the world, including Europe, to the United States. What does that do? Pushes up the price of renewables. 24th of February last year, Russia-Ukraine war starts. Trinidad and Tobago is in the middle of negotiating the completion of our large solar scale project, Project Lara. And we saw literally on the table before us the cost of a renewable solar project go up. Why? Because throughout Europe now they're in a gas crisis and they now rush to take the renewable resources of solar, etc. These are the realities. The Caribbean region and Latin America need energy security. Our small CARICOM neighbors are desperate for what we take for granted. And right now, many of them are in the process of renegotiating or looking down the road as to how do they generate electricity, because many of them right now are using the fuels, still some diesel generated, which is a bad emitter for the production of the electricity. And if the rest of the developed world is saying, hey, clean up, you need to reduce your emissions, how do they do that? How do they upgrade their plant? How do they move to renewables? And that's where the concept of bankability comes in. Another very frustrating concept, personally, I find. Because as we have discussions with providing energy security, and we look at our CARICOM neighbors and the countries, and you're being told, look, you need to go to renewables, look at solar, look at geothermal, look at wind turbines. Nobody talks about what's the cost. Nobody talks about what these costs have been driven up. We all say, yes, the cost has come down. But in reality, if you go to price those projects now, the cost is a lot higher than it was before the Russia-Ukraine war. So what I'd like this conference to think about as you all go forward is reality. And what we in Trinidad and Tobago are going to do, with no apologies for it whatsoever, is we will continue using and utilizing our God-given resources of oil and gas, because that is what keeps our economy going. And even when you're speaking to the countries that want us to reduce emissions, and worse yet, our neighbors, and you say, okay, well, let's talk about the bankability of our project. It's consultant after consultant to do all sorts of feasibility studies, but where's the reality? When a government needs to be able to provide for its citizens to flick on that light switch and to pay the light bill at the end of the month, none of that is helping them or helping the person who needs it. When you look at the lesser developed countries, there are still people, including in our region, using wood and the burning of wood to cook. These are the realities, and we have a responsibility to bring energy security in clean and effective ways to them. But that is what we need to do. And that's where the bankability of all of these projects never seems to cross that line. And in having conversations with the more developed countries who want to help, again, let's look at the reality. There was a pledge at COP26 and before to put hundreds of billions of dollars in a fund to help those countries that need the money, because we want to do it. We want to move to cleaner sources of energy. And right up the islands next door to us, and even those countries to the south of us or to the west of us that have found huge hydrocarbon resources, they are suffering right now in their populations with where do they get energy security from. The hundreds of billions of dollars have not come in. The bankability and being pushed towards these multilateral lending agencies, it is not easy. It is fraught in red tape and bureaucracy, understandably so. But these are some of the dilemmas we face, in my view, in dealing with the reality. And that is the setting I want to give the conference as you all begin to use your collective brain power over the next few days having discussions. Trinidad and Tobago, fortunately, is in a very good place. We have the infrastructure that is going to carry us through the transition. The concepts you heard the panel before talking about, we are pushing hard and moving as quickly as we can. And I'll tell you all talked about speed. I am frustrated with speed as well, as the Permanent Secretary and the staff at the Ministry of Energy will tell you, and the other ministries. Because I recognize with energy how volatile it is and how quickly it changes. I just gave you two examples. Russia goes to war with Ukraine, boom, the whole thing changes. Europe's reaction, start back up coal plants. Worse emitters from fossil fuel. We don't talk about that. But they had to. Why? Because they needed to provide energy security for their citizens. And that's the responsibility we have as well. That's the first example. United States, who are doing a magnificent job and leading a charge as the second largest emitter in the world towards reduction of carbon, passed one act, the IRA, change the whole landscape for the rest of us. So we are now competing to get the resources, whether they be physical resources of renewables or other areas, because it has also affected the supply chains in the oil, in the gas. You speak to the panel that was there before and ask them how difficult it has suddenly become to get the resources from the service providers to build the infrastructure that we need. So friends, that is the reality that we're dealing with. Trinidad and Tobago is well poised. We have the opportunity right in front of us to make sure that we go through this transition properly. We will do what is necessary and what is responsible to make our contribution towards reducing the emissions, and you're seeing it. We're working with our stakeholders. BP, Shell are working with us. We got the first solar project signed and sealed, albeit at a higher cost because of what I spoke about. But that is 10% of our electricity needs immediately in one project, and we will continue. We're looking at wind, and I thank the IDB for the work they're doing with us. But we're not moving quickly enough. In the other areas, we are looking at the carbon capture. I say sequestration and utilization. This morning I've heard utilization and sequestration. Same thing. Because we have the opportunity in Trinidad where we have a cluster of plants at Point Lisas. And if we get it right, all of those plants that are producing the petchems, the ammonia, the methanol, the urea, UAN, if we join together with government, we can pull the carbon from one area, send it into the pipelines that we have that exist, and determine where to put it, thereby cleaning up their products, meaning less carbon, our products from Trinidad and Tobago remain competitive. And this is not something new for us. It is something where the infrastructure exists, and we just have to move quickly to get it done. On the renewable side, we will be going out for more renewable sources of energy. I've heard what you all have said about the wanting to even households put solar panels on your rooftops and the frustration. One day I will give this story about how even we in the government face that bureaucratic frustration, including persons writing memos to try and slow down a project with a wrong, in my view, interpretation of the law, and how that too led to further delay. So we too in government know the frustration taking place. And we are moving hard to try and unlock these things, to get more private sector investment in the renewables. It has to be a balance. There is no country in the world, I saw the World Economic Forum put out an interesting paper recently talking about countries that went 100% renewables. So I immediately opened it up to read it. It's based on 100% renewable energy for a day, for a few hours, etc. Because the reality is it has to be a balance. The reality is natural gas is going to be around for decades to come. It is a few squeaky wheels making the noise that everybody must come off hydrocarbons. We have to utilize technology that exists now and is improving on a daily basis in the application of natural gas going forward. And I stand here proud again that it is Trinidad and Tobago that began that international public conversation in February of last year, where coming out of COP26, you had the squeaky wheels making the most noise and suppressing this continued investment in hydrocarbons, where you even had some financial institutions being put under pressure that they should not invest in hydrocarbon projects going forward. Friends, I could go on for a long time about this because I feel passionately about it. We have to look after the region first and foremost. We have the resources in the region. Another proposition that we are advocating is if we join forces in the region, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, Guyana, we could help to provide energy security for the rest of the region. When you speak to some of our smaller islands and they are now looking at how do they generate electricity going forward in the next few years, they have to change out aged plant. What step do they take next? I beg and I plead with the multilateral lending agencies. Find ways, because in my view, the only way renewables become bankable in some of these jurisdictions is there has to be an element of grant funding. So if you're really interested in reducing emissions globally, you have to contribute it, because the smaller countries are not going to be able to afford it. If we in Trinidad and Tobago know what it takes to get one of these projects across the line with a lot of government intervention, I use that as a live example of how difficult it may be elsewhere. And the only way we will really clean up this planet and the difficulties we're having with global greenhouse gas emissions, methane, carbon dioxide, etc., is a global push. Because if we switch off everything in the whole CARICOM and Latin America, everything, just switch it off, there's only 3%. 3% really doesn't go that long and that far in the fight. So just bear that reality in mind. Be assured that this government, Trinidad and Tobago, are doing what we need to do because we are responsible. We're also moving to procure in public transport, electric buses. We were one of the first governments in the region to move all taxes off of the importation of all electric vehicles. Use that as a third example of the reality of the world. You can't get the electric vehicles you want. There is a global supply problem with it. The more developed countries that have the bigger markets get first pick. our motor vehicle agents in Trinidad and Tobago were way down the priority list to even get access to electric vehicles. Our plants, all of our operators at Point Lisas, I know that they're applying all of the technology that they need to, and they're looking at the future and what needs to be done. I'd like to thank all of you all for continuing to work with us, our upstreamers, our downstreamers, the great job that NGC and the NGC group are moving towards. Mark will talk about NGC Green and where we want to go with it, because we need an implementing arm that can get these things done. From ideas to action. I have a much more crass way of describing it that I wouldn't use this morning. But we need to move to implementation and stop talk. Arlene, I couldn't resist when you were talking about what you were doing there as the National Oil Company representative. Today is Monday. Wednesday last week, I was in Miami at the Association of International Energy Negotiators. We were invited to present a paper on what we've done in Trinidad and Tobago because it's made that much of an impact. And hopefully that will be broadcast to the population soon. 45 minutes of speaking, 6,800 words of what we have done here since 2015 and a difficult journey, but again at the forefront globally where people listen to us. Arlene, there was one key presenter on the day before me, a Philippe Bayon, very impressive. And he presented on the role of national oil companies in the energy transition. You have a role to play. Heritage has a role. You all have to drive it forward on the oil side, NGC drive it forward on the gas side. So don't lose hope. The NOCs have a very important role to play, as the IOCs do as well. We are moving forward as well with a green hydrogen project. I expect detractors. I expect people to say we can't get it done. We will get it done. Cabinet took the decision. We're going to invest the money in it, and we will build this out ourselves. Again, because we have the infrastructure here. It is going to go to market. One of the concepts we're developing now is for private sector investment in it as we build out our first green hydrogen plant. So I didn't spend too much time here this morning talking about what it is we have done and we are doing in Trinidad. One thing I feel certain of is we are taking the necessary steps as a government to push and to continue pushing our industry to make sure we're globally competitive, and we will be around for decades to come. And I end by saying there was a great quote that was used when I was in some negotiations years ago. A rising tide lifts all vessels, all ships. We have a responsibility to assist the rest of the region, the rest of the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, as much as we can, small Trinidad and Tobago, in providing energy security and sustainability going forward. But just think about the reality of what they face, what we face, and how do we get there as we sit and speak about all of these different concepts, some of which, in my view, are being forced down our throat a little too much. Thank you all very much for your attention this morning, and thank you for the opportunity just to share a few thoughts of mine with you this morning.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that. I think giving us some instructions for how we should proceed over the next 2 days, and this real sense about dealing with reality, and as we move from the ideas to actions, and so there have to be ideas which are implementable, things which we can do. And one of the reasons why we decided to make this conference a little bit more casual in terms of dress code than we usually have is because we wanted to sort of roll sleeves up and get down into the nitty-gritty of the details. And also we told the hotel that they didn't need to keep things quite as cold as they usually do in the room, because saving electricity, the whole air conditioning conversation which we have to have in the country. So thank you very much, Minister, for that. So we now have our coffee break. I'll encourage everyone to visit the booths outside. We're just going to ask the Minister if you could stay with us perhaps 5 minutes just to have a quick look at the booths. There's 10 booths we have outside. I'd like just to acknowledge at this point the support from our sponsors who make this event possible. The NGC Group of Companies, BP Trinidad and Tobago, Shell Trinidad and Tobago, Proman and Heritage Petroleum as our platinum sponsors. Our gold sponsor, Republic Bank. Silver Plus, the Inter-American Development Bank, and our silver sponsors, Massey Wood, Porsche and Lifestyle Motors, and Stork. So thank you all the sponsors for their support. Just before we break, I just want to encourage everyone to please confirm with us whether they're going to be joining us for the tour on day 3 to Point Lisis around some of the Proman plants. There's an online form that you should have got in the email that you got this morning, your welcoming email this morning. Please fill that form out. If you didn't get it, please just talk to somebody in the Secretariat about signing up for that tour on Wednesday. So we'll resume at 10 minutes past 11, half an hour from now, with a keynote presentation from Mr. Mark Luquan, President of the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. Could I ask people please just to remain seated just for 30 seconds while we go with the Minister outside, and then everybody else can get up and follow for the coffee break. So we will just go to the booths and then we'll proceed from there. So thank you all. We'll see you back at 10 past 11.